Stand on the Pont Neuf today, the oldest bridge in Paris, despite its name meaning new, and look down at the Seine sliding past in silent witness. Beneath your feet, beneath the cobblestones and the river stones, and 2,000 years of sediment, lies the heart of Lutetia, a Celtic fishing village that became the most revolutionary city in human history. Paris is the Eiffel Tower piercing fog at dawn, the accordion melancholy of Edith Piaf, the smell of fresh croissants and Gauloise's smoke, the crack of baguettes breaking, the riot of May 1968, the runway that gave the world haute couture. It is Voltaire and Sartre arguing in cafes, Notre Dame's bells tolling across centuries, Haussmann's boulevards built for cannon fire and empire, the Lumiere brothers inventing cinema, Coco Chanel redefining women, and a city that has toppled more governments than any other on earth. But none of this was inevitable. Paris has been sacked by Vikings, ravaged by plague that killed half its population, starved during sieges until people ate rats, drenched in blood during revolutions, and occupied by enemies 3 times. It has executed its kings in public squares, torn down its own monuments in fury, and rebuilt itself in stone and iron and light. In the next 40 minutes, you're traveling from 250 BC to 2024, from a Celtic island fort to the City of Light, the global capital of art, revolution, and human ambition. We're covering Roman conquest, medieval cathedrals, 5 revolutions, 2 world wars, and one undeniable truth. Paris doesn't just survive history, it creates it. Using AI-assisted reconstructions based on period paintings, revolutionary engravings, and Belle Époque photography, we'll resurrect the faces and streets that made this city the heart of Western civilization. By the end, you'll understand why Paris matters more than its monuments. This is the story of 2,000 years of beauty and bloodshed, and it begins on an island in a cold river. Late afternoon, Vercingetorix, war chief of the Gauls, stands on the Île de la Cité, the island in the Seine, where Notre Dame will rise 12 centuries later, and watches the smoke. Roman legions under Julius Caesar are burning every settlement north of the river. The Parisii tribe has lived here for 200 years, fishing the Seine, trading with tribes from the Rhine to the Atlantic. Their town, Lutetia, is nothing grand. Timber houses, thatched roofs, wooden palisades. But it sits at the crossroads of Gaul's river trade, where the Seine bends and narrows, where islands provide natural defenses. Geography made Lutetia matter. The Seine connects the Atlantic coast to the heartland of Gaul. The river is navigable by boat, the islands defensible, the surrounding plains fertile. Merchants move wine, grain, amber, slaves. The Parisii mint their own coins stamped with a horse, a symbol of mobility and power. But geography is also a curse. Crossroads attract invaders. In 52 BC, Caesar's legions crush Vercingetorix at Alesia. Gaul becomes Roman. Lutetia becomes a provincial outpost of empire. The Romans rebuild. They drain marshes, lay straight roads, construct a forum and amphitheater on the left bank where the Sorbonne now stands. By 100 AD, Lutetia has perhaps 5,000 inhabitants. Romans, Romanized Celts, soldiers, merchants, slaves. The bathhouses, the thermes de Cluny, can accommodate thousands, heated floors warming bodies through winter. Latin replaces Celtic. Jupiter replaces the old gods. Life is structured, hierarchical, urban. Women grind grain, weave cloth, raise children. Men labor as blacksmiths, potters, mule drivers. Average life expectancy, 30 to 5 years if you survive childhood. Disease is constant. Dysentery, smallpox, malaria from the river marshes. In the 3rd century, everything fractures. Germanic tribes, Franks, Alemanni, raid across the Rhine. In 275 AD, barbarians sack Lutetia. The left bank burns. Survivors retreat to the Île de la Cité, the defensible island. They build a wall using stones from the ruined amphitheater. You can still see those recycled Roman blocks in the foundations of later buildings. The city shrinks. The population drops to perhaps 2,000. Rome's grip weakens. Christianity spreads, brought by a missionary named Denis, who according to legend was beheaded on Montmartre, Martyrs' Hill, in 250 AD, and walked 6 kilometers carrying his own head, preaching the entire way. His shrine becomes the foundation of the Basilica of Saint-Denis, burial place of French kings. By 360 AD, the Roman Emperor Julian winters in Lutetia and writes admiringly of its good wine and mild winters. But Rome is dying. In 410, Visigoths sack Rome itself. In 451, Attila the Hun threatens Paris. According to legend, Saint Geneviève, a 28-year-old woman, convinces Parisians not to flee. Attila turns away. Geneviève becomes the city's patron saint. In 486 AD, Clovis, king of the Franks, conquers Paris and makes it his capital. The scar, Roman order collapses. Barbarian warlords rule from crumbling stone. The gift, the island fortress remains. The walls still stand. The idea of Paris as a capital, not a village, not a town, but a seat of power, survives. Clovis is crowned here. Christianity becomes the religion of Frankish kings. The Roman city is gone, but the island endures. June 8th, 845. Dawn. A Frankish watchman on the Ile de la Cité sees them first. 120 Viking longships rowing up the Seine, dragon prows cutting the mist. The Northmen have come to Paris. For months they've raided the coasts, burning monasteries, enslaving monks. Now want the richest city in the Frankish kingdom. The island's walls are strong, but the bridges are weak. The Vikings beach their ships and storm the city. Charles the Bald, king of the Franks, is absent, fighting other wars. Paris burns. Churches are sacked. Treasures looted. The Vikings demand 7,000 pounds of silver to leave. Charles pays. They return in 856, 861, 865, 885. Each time, Paris bleeds silver. But in 885, Paris fights. The Vikings besiege the city for nearly a year, with 40,000 warriors. Count Odo, a Frankish nobleman, leads the defense. The islanders hold the bridges. Boiling oil and stones rain on Viking heads. Siege towers are burned. Starvation sets in. Rats, dogs, horses, everything is eaten. By winter, the Vikings withdraw. Odo becomes a hero. 5 years later, he's elected king of the Franks. The message is clear. Paris no longer bows. By 1100, Paris is reborn. The population climbs toward 25,000. The right bank expands with markets. Les Halles becomes the city's stomach, where butchers, fishmongers, bakers hawk their goods in a chaos of noise and stench. The left bank becomes the intellectual quarter. In 1150, scholars begin teaching at makeshift schools near the Abbey of Sainte-Geneviève. By 1200, these schools formalize into the University of Paris, the Sorbonne, where theology, law, and philosophy are debated in Latin. Students come from England, Italy, Germany. Paris becomes the intellectual capital of Christendom. And then comes the cathedral. In 1163, Bishop Maurice de Sully lays the foundation stone for Notre Dame de Paris. For 2 centuries, stonemasons carve, glaziers craft stained glass, carpenters build scaffolding 60 meters high. By 1345, Notre Dame is complete, a fortress of faith, its towers visible for kilometers, its rose windows glowing like captured sunlight. Inside, the cathedral can hold 9,000 worshippers. Kings are crowned here. Relics are stored, the crown of thorns allegedly worn by Christ. Notre Dame is not just a church, it is a statement. Paris is the daughter of the church, the heart of Christendom, the rival of Rome itself. But medieval Paris is brutal. Streets are narrow, twisting, filthy. Waste is dumped into the Seine, which is also the drinking water supply. Typhoid and dysentery are constant. In 1348, the Black Death arrives, carried by fleas on rats from ships docking at Marseille. Within 2 years, half of Paris dies. Perhaps 50,000 people. Bodies pile in mass graves outside the walls. Entire neighborhoods are abandoned. The city stinks of death. Survivors are traumatized but also empowered. Labor shortages mean workers can demand higher wages. The feudal order cracks. Paris is also a city of learning and power. By 1300, it is the largest city north of the Alps. Perhaps 200,000 people crammed inside walls built by King Philippe Auguste in the 1190s. The city spreads onto both banks. The Louvre begins as a fortress on the right bank, built to guard against English invasion. The Sainte-Chapelle, commissioned by Louis IX, Saint Louis, in 1242, houses the crown of thorns in a chapel of stained glass so vivid it feels alive. Paris is the capital of a kingdom, the seat of a university, the home of a cathedral, and the envy of Europe. The scar, half the population dead from plague, buried in pits, forgotten. The gift, Notre Dame standing, the Sorbonne teaching, the idea of Paris as both power and thought, both throne and cloister. But war is coming, and it will last 100 years. May 30th, 1431. Noon. Rouen, Normandy. Joan of Arc, 19 years old, illiterate peasant girl, visionary warrior who saved France, burns at the stake. She's been convicted of heresy by a pro-English court. Paris is under English occupation. For 12 years, since 1419, Burgundians allied with England have controlled the city. The Dauphin Charles, the rightful king, has fled south. France is collapsing, but Joan rallied France. At 17, she convinced Charles to give her an army. She lifted the siege of Orléans in 1429, a miraculous victory. She marched Charles to Reims and crowned him king. She tried to retake Paris in September 1429. She failed. Wounded by a crossbow bolt, she retreated. Burgundians captured her in 1430, sold her to the English. Now she's ash, but her martyrdom ignites France. By 1436, Charles VII recaptures Paris. By 1453, the English are expelled from France, except Calais. The 100 Years' War is over. France has survived, and Paris, traumatized, impoverished, decimated by war and plague, begins to rebuild. The Renaissance arrives late, but gloriously. François I, crowned in 1515, is a king obsessed with art, architecture, and power. He invites Leonardo da Vinci to France. Leonardo dies at Amboise in 1519, possibly in François' arms. He begins transforming the Louvre from fortress to palace. He builds the Château de Fontainebleau outside Paris, importing Italian artists and craftsmen. Paris becomes a Renaissance capital, not Florence or Rome, but aspiring to rival them. But Paris is also torn by religious war. Martin Luther nails his 95 Theses in 1517. Protestantism spreads. France splits between Catholics and Huguenots, French Protestants. In 1572, the wedding of Henri de Navarre, a Protestant prince, to Marguerite de Valois, a Catholic princess, is supposed to unite the factions. Instead, it becomes a massacre. On August 24th, Saint Bartholomew's Day, Catholic mobs murder Huguenots across Paris. 3,000 die in Paris alone, 10,000 across France. Rivers run red, bodies are dumped into the Seine, the wedding feast turns to slaughter. The religious wars rage for 30 years. Paris becomes a Catholic stronghold. In 1589, King Henri III is assassinated by a Catholic fanatic. Henri de Navarre, the Protestant prince who survived the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, becomes Henri IV. But Catholic Paris refuses to accept a Protestant king. Henri besieges his own capital. Parisians starve. Finally, in 1593, Henri converts to Catholicism. His alleged words, "Paris is well worth a mass." In 1594, he enters Paris. The wars end. Henri IV rebuilds. He constructs the Pont Neuf, Paris's first stone bridge without houses built on it, allowing unobstructed views of the river. He expands the Louvre. He plants trees along the Seine. He issues the Edict of Nantes in 1598, granting religious tolerance to Huguenots. But in 1610, Henri IV is assassinated by a Catholic fanatic named François Ravaillac, stabbed to death in his carriage on the Rue de la Ferronnerie. Paris mourns. Henri was loved, the king who brought peace, who said every Frenchman should have a chicken in the pot every Sunday. His death ends an era. The scar, 3,000 murdered in religious frenzy, the streets soaked in sectarian blood. The gift, Henri IV's vision of tolerance and urban beauty, the Pont Neuf standing as a symbol of openness and light. But absolutism is coming, and it will be magnificent and terrible. July 14th, 1789, morning. A crowd of Parisians, craftsmen, shopkeepers, women, unemployed laborers, marches toward the Bastille, a medieval fortress on the eastern edge of the city. It's been a hot summer. Bread prices have soared. King Louis XVI has just dismissed his finance minister, Jacques Necker, who is popular. Rumors spread that royal troops are massing to crush Paris. The crowd wants weapons. The Bastille is a royal prison and armory. Its governor, the Marquis de Launay, has 82 soldiers and 32 Swiss guards. The crowd has fury. By aft, noon, the Bastille is under siege. De Launay refuses to surrender. The crowd brings cannons. Mutinous royal soldiers join the attackers. By evening, De Launay surrenders. The crowd storms in, finding only 7 prisoners, none political heroes. De Launay is dragged outside and beheaded with a pocket knife. His head is mounted on a pike and paraded through the streets. The Bastille is demolished, stone by stone. The French Revolution has begun. But rewind 200 years. After Henri IV's assassination in 1610, his son Louis XIII inherits the throne at age 9. His chief minister, Cardinal Richelieu, centralizes royal power, suppressing nobles and Huguenots. When Louis XIII dies in 1643, his 5-year-old son becomes Louis XIV, the Sun King. Louis XIV reigns for 72 years, the longest in European history. He builds Versailles, a palace 12 miles from Paris, designed to awe and intimidate. He moves the court there in 1682, leaving Paris as a merchant city, not the seat of monarchy. Paris under Louis XIV is splendid and squalid. The nobility live in grand hotels particuliers, private mansions with courtyards and gardens. The poor crowd into tenements, 6 families to a floor. The city has 300,000 people by 1700, but no sewers, no street lighting, until Louis XIV orders lanterns hung. No police force beyond corrupt royal guards. Crime is rampant. Public executions at the Place de Grève entertain crowds. Beggars are everywhere. But Paris is also the Enlightenment. Voltaire, born in Paris in 1694, writes philosophy attacking the church and absolute monarchy. Rousseau publishes The Social Contract in 1762, arguing sovereignty belongs to the people. Diderot edits the Encyclopedia, systematizing human knowledge. Coffee houses become salons where ideas ignite. The Enlightenment is born in Parisian cafes and salons, where intellectuals debate liberty, equality, reason. Then comes the crisis. Louis XV reigned 1715 to 1774, and Louis XVI, 1774 to 1792, inherit a bankrupt kingdom. France spent fortunes fighting wars. the War of Austrian Succession, the 7 Years' War, supporting the American Revolution. The treasury is empty. Nobles refuse to pay taxes. Poor harvests in the 1780s cause bread riots. In 1789, Louis XVI convenes the Estates General, a medieval parliament not called since 1614, hoping to raise taxes. The Third Estate, Commoners, breaks away, declares itself the National Assembly, and swears the tennis court oath. They will not disband until France has a constitution. Then, the Bastille falls. The revolution radicates. In October 1789, a crowd of Parisian women marches to Versailles and forces the royal family back to Paris. The king becomes a prisoner. In 1791, Louis tries to flee France. He's caught at Varennes and brought back. In August 1792, sans-culottes, radical working-class Parisians, storm the Tuileries Palace, massacre the Swiss Guard, and imprison the royal family. In September, over 1,000 prisoners, priests, nobles, suspected counter-revolutionaries, are dragged from Paris jails and murdered in the September massacres. Paris is drowning in blood. In January 1793, Louis XVI is tried for treason, convicted, and guillotined in the Place de la Révolution, now Place de la Concorde. 20,000 Parisians watch. In October, Marie Antoinette follows her husband to the scaffold. The terror begins. Robespierre and the Committee of Public Safety send thousands to the guillotine. Nobles, moderates, anyone suspected of disloyalty. By July 1794, over 17,000 have been executed, 3,000 in Paris alone. The guillotine at Place de la Révolution works daily. Blood runs in gutters. Then, on July 27, 1794, 9 Thermidor in the revolutionary calendar, Robespierre is arrested and guillotined the next day. The terror ends. France is exhausted, traumatized, and free of monarchy. The scar, 17,000 executed, a city soaked in revolutionary bloodshed, families destroyed, the gift, the declaration of the rights of man and of the citizen, the end of absolute monarchy, the idea that governments exist to serve the people, not rule them. But Paris is about to crown an emperor. December 2nd, 1804, noon, Notre Dame Cathedral. Napoleon Bonaparte, 35 years old, general, consul, conqueror, places the crown of emperor on his own head, refusing to let Pope Pius VII crown him, asserting his power comes from himself, not God. Paris is his capital. He has ended the revolution's chaos, imposed order, won wars across Europe. He rebuilds Paris. He constructs the Arc de Triomphe, begun in 1806, completed 1836, to honor his armies. He orders the Arc de Triomphe du Carrousel, the Rue de Rivoli, new sewers, new markets. He plunders Europe's art treasures and fills the Louvre. By 1812, he controls most of Europe. Then comes Russia. In 1812, Napoleon invades with 600,000 men. Winter destroys his army. By 1813, coalitions of enemies close in. In 1814, Paris is occupied by Russian, Prussian, and Austrian troops. Napoleon abdicates, exiled to Elba. He returns in 1815, the 100 Days, but is crushed at Waterloo. He dies in exile on St. Helena in 1821. France becomes a monarchy again, but Paris has tasted power. In 1830, Parisians revolt again, the July Revolution, overthrowing the conservative Charles X and installing Louis Philippe, the citizen king. In 1848, revolution returns. Parisians build barricades, overthrow Louis Philippe, and declare the Second Republic. But by 1851, Louis Napoleon, Napoleon's nephew, stages a coup and crowns himself Emperor Napoleon III in 1852. Napoleon III transforms Paris. He appoints Georges Eugène Haussmann as prefect and orders him to rebuild. Haussmann is ruthless. Between 1853 and 1870, he demolishes medieval Paris, narrow, twisting streets where revolutionaries can build barricades. He replaces them with wide boulevards designed for cannon and cavalry. He builds parks, Bois de Boulogne, Butte-Chaumont, train stations, Gare du Nord, Gare de Lyon, an opera house, Palais Garnier, new sewers. The Paris system becomes the most advanced in Europe. He evicts 60,000 working-class Parisians from the center, pushing them to the outskirts. The city becomes a bourgeois showcase, elegant, expensive, and exclusive. But Haussmann's Paris is also the Belle Époque. By 1900, Paris is the cultural capital of the world. Impressionist painters Monet, Renoir, Degas capture the boulevards and cafes. Montmartre becomes the bohemian heart. Toulouse-Lautrec paints the Moulin Rouge. Picasso arrives in 1901 and invents Cubism. The Lumiere brothers invent cinema in 1895, screening the first films at the Grand Café on Boulevard des Capucines. The Eiffel Tower rises for the 1889 World's Fair. Iron latticework 300 meters high. Initially hated, a metal asparagus, now iconic. Paris hosts the 1900 World's Fair, attracting 50 million visitors. The city has 3 million inhabitants, electric lights, automobiles, and the metro, opened in 1900. But inequality is extreme. The wealthy live in Haussmann's apartments. High ceilings, balconies, servants' quarters. The poor crowd into shanty towns on the edges. Workers labor 12-hour days in factories, living in squalor. Tuberculosis kills thousands annually. Anarchists plant bombs. Émile Henry bombs the Café Terminus in 1894, killing 1 and wounding 20. Class hatred simmers. And then, August 1914, war. The scar. 60,000 evicted, a city rebuilt for empire and control. Inequality festering beneath beauty. The gift, the Paris we recognize. Boulevards, cafes, the Eiffel Tower, the metro, the Impressionists, cinema, modernity itself born here. But war will shatter everything. August 25th, 1944, afternoon. General Charles de Gaulle, 6'5", imperious, enters Paris down the Champs-Élysées. 2 million Parisians line the avenue, cheering, weeping. Paris is free. 4 years of Nazi occupation are over, but the scars are everywhere. Rewind to 1914. World War I begins in August. German armies advance toward Paris. The government flees to Bordeaux. In September, French and British forces halt the Germans at the Battle of the Marne, 30 kilometers from Paris. The trenches settle. For 4 years, Paris is behind the lines, safe but traumatized. Soldiers on leave flood the cafes. Women work in munitions factories. The wounded fill hospitals. In 1918, Germany launches a final offensive. Long-range artillery, Big Bertha guns, shell Paris from 75 miles away. 256 Parisians are killed. Then, November 11th, 1918, the armistice. France has won, but at cost. 1.4 million French soldiers dead. The interwar years are golden, but fragile. The 1920s, les années folles, the crazy years, bring jazz, Josephine Baker dancing at the Folies Bergère, Hemingway and Fitzgerald drinking at the Dome and the Select in Montparnasse. Paris is the capital of the lost generation, modernism, surrealism. Picasso paints Guernica in his Paris studio in 1937, a howl against fascism. But the 1930s bring depression and fascism. In 1940, Germany invades. Within 6 weeks, France collapses. On June 14, 1940, German troops march into Paris. The city is declared an open city. No resistance, no destruction. The government flees. Marshal Pétain signs an armistice. France is divided. The north occupied by Germany, the south ruled by Vichy, a collaborationist government. Paris under occupation is silent. Swastikas hang from the Eiffel Tower, the Arc de Triomphe, the Senate. German officers requisition the best hotels, the Ritz, the Krillian. Collaborators and black marketeers thrive. Jews are rounded up. In July 1942, French police arrest 13,152 Jews, including 4,115 children, and hold them in the Vélodrome d'Hiver, an indoor cycling stadium, without food or water for 5 days. They're deported to Auschwitz. Fewer than 100 survive. But resistance stirs. The French resistance, saboteurs, spies, fighters, organize. Jean Moulin unifies the factions until the Gestapo captures and tortures him to death. In 1944, the Allies invade Normandy. By August, the Allies approach Paris. On August 19th, the Paris police strike. Resistance fighters seize the Préfecture de Police. Barricades rise in the streets, echoes of 1789, 1830, 1848, 1871. General Dietrich von Choltitz, the German commander, receives hit. Lair's orders: destroy Paris, burn it. Choltitz hesitates. On August 25th, French and American tanks enter Paris. Choltitz surrenders. Paris is saved, liberated, and scarred. The scar: 4 years of occupation, humiliation, collaboration, and 76,000 Jews deported to death. The gift: liberation, survival, the resistance's courage, and de Gaulle's restoration of French dignity. But the city must rebuild its soul. May 6, 1968. Morning. Sorbonne. Students occupy the Sorbonne, barricading themselves inside. They're protesting rigid university rules, capitalism, consumerism, the Vietnam War, and the authoritarian government of Charles de Gaulle. Police storm the campus, arresting students. Protests explode. On May 10th, students build barricades in the Latin Quarter, ripping up cobblestones, overturning cars. Police fire tear gas. Hundreds are injured. Within days, 10 million workers across France go on strike. France is paralyzed. De Gaulle nearly falls. By June, the government makes concessions. The protests end. But May 1968 changes France, questioning authority, demanding rights, rejecting old hierarchies. Rewind to 1945. Paris is liberated, but broken. Housing is scarce, buildings damaged by bombs, neglected during occupation. Food is rationed until 1949. The economy is shattered, but Paris rebuilds. In the 1950s and 60s, modernist towers rise, concrete and glass, rejecting Haussmann's elegance. Les Halles, the historic market, is demolished in 1971, replaced by a shopping mall. Parisians protest but fail. The Pompidou Centre, with its colourful exposed pipes and inside-out architecture, opens in 1977. Controversial, eventually beloved. Immigration transforms Paris. After World War II, France invites workers from former colonies, Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, West Africa, to rebuild. By the 1970s, Paris is multicultural. Arab, African, Asian communities in the banlieues, the suburbs. BS ringing the city. Tensions rise. In 1961, during the Algerian War, police massacre 200 Algerian protesters, dumping bodies in the Seine. The massacre is covered up for decades. Culturally, Paris remains vital. The new wave, directors like Truffaut and Godard, reinvent cinema in the 1960s. Serge Gainsbourg and Jane Birkin scandalize with Je t'aime, moi non plus. Paris fashion, Yves Saint Laurent, Karl Lagerfeld at Chanel, dominates global runways. But the city fractures. The 1980s bring economic decline. Factories close. Unemployment rises. The banlieues become marginalized, poor, neglected, resentful. In 2005, Riots erupt after 2 teenagers are electrocuted fleeing police. For 3 weeks, suburbs burn. Cars torched, buildings set aflame. The riots expose inequality, racism, and the failure of integration. Terrorism strikes. In January 2015, Islamist gunmen murdered 12 at the satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo. In November 2015, coordinated attacks at the Bataclan concert hall, cafes, and the Stade de France kill 130. Paris mourns. Je suis Charlie, je suis Paris trend globally. In 2019, Notre Dame burns. A fire during restoration destroys the roof and spire. The world watches in horror as flames consume the cathedral. President Macron vows to rebuild. Restoration continues. Today, Paris is 2.1 million within city limits, 12.5 million in the metro area. It's the EU's second largest economy, a global finance and tourism hub, over 30 million visitors annually. The city hosted the 2024 Summer Olympics, showcasing modern Paris. Challenges remain. Gentrification displaces working-class residents. Homelessness rises. Climate protests. The Gilets-Jones Yellow Vest movement of 2018-2019 paralyzed streets. But Paris endures, building new metro lines, Grand Paris Express, greening boulevards, debating its colonial past and immigrant present. You can still walk streets Napoleon walked, visit the Louvre that housed kings and emperors, stand in Notre Dame when it reopens, ride the metro that Belle Époque engineers dug. Every layer is visible if you know where to look. 2,276 years. Celts, Romans, Franks, Vikings, medieval kings, Renaissance princes, revolutionaries, emperors, fascists, and the French themselves. Paris has endured them all. This city survived Caesar's conquest, survived the Vikings, survived the Black Death, survived religious massacres, survived 5 revolutions, survived the terror's guillotine, survived Prussian siege, Nazi occupation, and its own fury. It burned, it rebuilt, it starved, it rebuilt. It was torn by revolution, class war, terrorism, and self-destruction. And every time, it came back more beautiful, more defiant, more itself. What defines Paris is not monuments, though it has the most beautiful on earth. It's revolution, the refusal to accept authority without question, the insistence that power belongs to the people, that beauty matters, that ideas change the world. The same spirit that stormed the Bastille, that built Notre Dame, that painted the Impressionists, that resisted the Nazis, that rioted in '68, that spirit still walks the boulevards. This city built wealth on empire and colonialism. It massacred Huguenots and Algerians. It guillotined thousands. It hasn't fully reckoned with that darkness. But it also gave the world the declaration of the rights of man, Impressionism, cinema, haute couture, and the idea that cities are for living, not just surviving. Paris is not one story. It's 12 million stories layered like sediment in the Seine. If you're Parisian, every street you walk is a palimpsest of 2 millennia. Roman roads beneath your feet, medieval stones in your walls, revolutionary ghosts in your squares. If you're not, you now understand why Paris isn't just a city. It's an idea. The idea that beauty and revolution are not opposites. That a city can be a work of art and a battlefield. That you can overthrow kings and still build cathedrals. Because Paris doesn't compromise. It demands, it creates, it destroys, it endures. If you found this valuable, hit that like button. It helps us create more of these journeys through time. Subscribe if you want to see more cities resurrected, their stories told honestly and powerfully. Drop a comment. Which city next? Rome? Istanbul? Athens? Berlin? You decide. From Lutetia to the City of Light. From a Celtic fishing village to the capital of revolution. From timber huts on an island to the Eiffel Tower piercing the sky. From the Parigi to 12 million people speaking 100 languages. History never ends. Neither will we.